谢谢大家，我很荣幸有今天的机会跟你讲一下关于我们的 MGI 这个麦肯锡的全球研究院的一些看法。可是我听到了大家都说了，今天需要一个人要讲英语啊 ，so today I will do this in English. Okay. I wouldn't want to upset the organizers. So today I'm going to talk to you about this title, On the Cusp of a New Era, which means sort of at the beginning of something. And we think we're really at a very interesting moment. And generally speaking, we would not say this. As anybody who's a market participant, you know the number one rule in markets is never give a price and a date in the same sentence. You can do one but not the other. Don't put them together. So today, though, I'm going to do that. I'm going to give you, if you will, a specific expectation of what's going to come next. So there are years when nothing happens, and there are years in which centuries happen. So this was, I think, there are a number of people who this is attributed to, Lenin amongst them. But see this picture here. It's called the new planet. And you see this planet rising up. And then what's going on? These people are running, some of them running away, some of them running towards. What's going on is their expectations about the world are now suddenly called into question because there's this new planet. Well, we think it's, of course, not that there is actually a new planet, but it's somehow all of a sudden you see it. So sometimes you might have seen that video with the gorilla, where there's apparently a gorilla amongst a number of people playing basketball, and the first time you don't see it, and the second time you don't see it, and the third time you say, my God, how did I miss it? Yes, this is that moment. There is a gorilla, or there is a new planet, and now we're starting to see it. This was a pretty wild couple of years. So I don't know about you. I did about 140 days of lockdown in Shanghai. Not many people can say that was part of their life experience. We've had a war. We have a continuing war in the Ukraine. We have inflation. We have AI. We have US, China. It does seem like this is very different all of a sudden. The environment seems very different. Have there been times like this before? We'd say yes. Sometimes in a short period of time, everything changes. So the period after World War II, 1944 to 1946, we think is one of those years, where in the space of 36 short months, we set up the United Nations. We created the atomic age. We ended the World War II and rebuilt Europe. And we launched what will become the post-war boom, where there was a golden age of engineering, petroleum took off, population took off, all based on a very short period of time. So that was one. Another time like that was when that ended, 1971 to 73. Where all of a sudden we had the Arab oil embargo and a crisis around that. Japan all of a sudden becomes bigger than Germany. We lose the gold standard. Détente between USSR and US means the Cold War changes into something more unclear. And inflation. We call that the era of contention. And that goes on until another turning point, which would be 1989 to 92. And that was all of a sudden where we think the current era starts. Because what happened then? The Berlin Wall came down. The Gulf War happened. The World Wide Web started. The Soviet Union broke up. Maastricht creates the European Union. Deng Xiaoping goes to the south. So this is, if you will, the ideas that we have been operating under for the last 30 years start here. And we call it the era of markets, where all of the problems, all of the difficulties, All of the opportunities are going to be driven by markets, whether it's Reagan or Thatcher or Deng Xiaoping. Markets will be our solution, and they will be global, and they will bring the benefits of markets everywhere. We think we're about at the end of that. There are some concerns. This may not go smoothly. As I've told people, just because I'm smiling at you does not mean this is a good thing. There are some parallels with the 1970s, where we had this moment of, all of a sudden, where did this embargo come from? Where is this inflation coming from? Will we go into another 12 years like we did then of high inflation, difficult situations globally, or will we go beyond it? Well, I'll get to that, but let me tell you now what we think is going to happen. The first thing is we are now very clearly in a multipolar world. So here you can see the share of global GDP, the decline, relatively speaking, of Europe, the United States, the rise of Japan, of China, so the decline of Japan, the rise of China, the rest of Asia, and going forward, the rest of the world. And that's not just about economics. When we say multipolar, we mean everything. Laws, technology, society, culture, all of that. So my favorite analogy for this is that we've gone from a Star Trek world to a Star Wars world. I don't know how many of you know Star Trek. It was this American drama where you put on your uniforms on the USS Enterprise and you went out and you explored the world. And it was all very, I would say actually militaristic, but whatever. So the bridge of the USS Enterprise has slowly, imperceptibly, little by little, turned into the cantina in Star Wars, where there's music is playing, and there are all these funny-looking people all over the place, and there's occasional violence, and outside there's a sandstorm, and you just have to hope that the whole thing holds together. We're in the Star Wars world now. So that's the first thing that's happened. We've gone from Star Trek to Star Wars. 2, technology. For years and years and years, it was all about who could have the latest one of these. And people either had a phone or they didn't have a phone. It was about penetration. Now everybody has a phone. So it's no longer about the hardware, certainly. It's really about the application and the usage of that hardware. Because AI, to pick one, really works. People who have it will live longer, make more money, be more powerful, have the ability to control their environment. And people who do not have it will not have those things. So today, the digital divide is real. And we are now in an environment where we have to start thinking about ourselves as more than human. We are human plus. We are augmented. And how we use that power will make the difference to our societies. Third, demographics. We've talked a lot about that already. We've already passed peak child. There are not ever going to be more children on the planet than there are right now. That's done. We're also past peak rural. There are never going to be more farmers than there are on the planet right now. And we're pretty close to peak worker. So we're clearly in an environment where growth doesn't come from urbanization per se, because we've already urbanized. We're already there. So now it's about what happens inside those cities to the old people. So I think today's talks were great to sort of show that we need to reimagine what it means to be a certain age. So we are that older, aging world. That's the third thing. Resources. Well, of course, there's an energy transition, and that is a very expensive thing to do. We think that it will add at least 2 or 3 points to GDP that has to go into investment and that has to come out of consumption or somewhere. So either we do it or we don't. According to where we are right now, we are clearly not doing it, just to be clear. The world is clearly not going to do the net zero transition. What we will therefore have is adaptation, which will include migration, but will also imagine a new generation of engineering for our assets, for our cities. So this is more investment, either way. Either you invest in the mitigation or you invest in the adaptation, but it's a lot more investment. And that's not something we've done for the last 30 years. For the last 30 years, we reduced our investment. So everybody will need to save a little bit more. And finally, capitalization, or the balance sheet. For me, this was actually the most staggering thing. Over the last 20 years, not that long, the global balance sheet grew from $150 trillion to $450 trillion. We multiplied it by 3. We say, how did that happen? Well, so we must have been building a lot of new stuff. Wrong. We traded back and forth the same stuff. Valuations have doubled. So this may not be sustainable. I'm sorry. Debt is now up twice. So we think there is basically a need to reimagine policy. The policy can no longer be about monetary primarily or first, even about fiscal policy, but it has to be a complete switch towards economic policy if we want to avoid what they call mean reversion, which is when the valuation metrics collapse again, as we've had before. So this is a new financial era as well. So those are the 5 dimensions that we think are going to change. We're multipolar, we're aged, we're augmented, we are financially vulnerable, and we're carbon constrained. How would I sum this up? I would call it the age of stewardship. Markets operate according to rules based on assumptions about what's available, what's in scarcity, what do we allow transactions on. We have operated without any particular care for what the fundamental resources of our economy include, whether it's the capital markets, the environment, the public order, the ability to use technology. We have not stewarded these resources. And as we know, if you don't spend on something, if you don't take care of it, use it or lose it. We are now at that moment where we need to reinvest and reimagine our roles. Can we do it? Of course we can. There are a lot of good reasons to think that the world can tackle its problems. We have an amazing set of technologies, breakthrough technologies that are going mainstream. There are plenty of places around the world that can show the way, including right here. And very recently, we've managed to do quite a lot. I would note the vaccine thing, that was pretty special. So there, albeit with lots of conflict, but nonetheless, we should not lose heart. We should expect that the opportunities for us to pull together to manage this transition are still there. So as we say, nobody can go back and start a new beginning. That has happened. We're already in the new planet. The planet has risen. But we don't have to run around like chickens with our heads cut off, being terrified of this new world. Rather, anyone can start today and make a new ending. That's our opportunity. Change is the reality. Permanence is the illusion. Easy to say, hard to accept. But this is, of course, my personal experience of living in China, that what we Chinese really means is that we're good at change. We're good at accepting reality. 实事求是. Thank you.